friends! Today we're starting a brand new series called To Dye with KnitPicks, where we get to check out the different bear yarns KnitPicks has to offer and see how well they dye up. If you're not already familiar with KnitPicks, they're an online yarn store that has a variety of really affordable quality yarns. The majority of their yarn is pre-dyed, but they also offer some bare skeins of their most popular lines as well. First up is their Wool of the Andes yarn. I've used this yarn so much over the past few years, mostly for gloves, and I love how sturdy it is. It's 100% wool, and it's not super soft like merino is, but it's also not super stiff and scratchy like some other bare wools can be. These skeins are 100 grams, and unlike the pre-dyed ones, these have a superwash treatment added, which means they can withstand a wider variety of temperatures without felting. These skeins are worsted weight, currently cost $7.99 each, and they have about 220 yards of fiber. Now that we know the yarn we're working with, let's head over to the dyeing station to see how they got these colors. Then here are the bare skeins of yarn. I'm carefully sliding off their labels, opening up the loop, and adding a reusable zip tie to help prevent tangling during the dyeing process. You can see there are also a few yarn ties along the skein that help prevent tangling before the yarn is wound up as well. After the zip ties are on, they go into a bucket of water and sit and soak a while before we can dye them. This is also where I start to realize that this bucket was not a good choice for 4 skeins of this fluffy yarn. While our yarn finishes soaking for a bit, let's start mixing our colors together. For the semi-solid one, I'm going to use a really pretty wine-ish red, and I want to see how saturated we can make it. Whoa, look at that. For semi-solids and tonals, I like to make sure I move the yarn along so that it sits at different places along the zip tie every time I stir the pot or add something else to it. This prevents extra splotchiness that can occur when the skein isn't opened enough and the dye can't get inside all of the fibers. While that heats up, we can get started on our variegated skeins. For the other 3 skeins, I went with some autumn colors that I thought would go really nicely with the tonal one. Believe it or not, the colors you saw in the beginning were based off of a brown dye. I used brown to cover these whole skeins and they came out a little purple. Not really upset about it, but I don't know what it is about brown colors that just lean purple all the time for me. After the yarn sits in the dye and starts to heat up slowly, then I'll go in and add some citric acid to finish the process, and hopefully the rest of that dye in the pots and pans will become exhausted. Here we can see that most of the dye in the pot has been exhausted. It is still a little bit colored, but I think this is as much as we'll get it. And in the pans you can see that the water is pretty clear, so I'm gonna remove some of it and get ready for speckling. The first dye that I decided to speckle with was a yellow color, and it was a little too light for me against this yarn base. I guess I didn't think this through completely, but I went in and added some oranges as well, and then decided to just drop some large sections of purple, the same purple that we used for the tonal, so I thought it would match nicely. Looking at this yarn in the pan, I was honestly starting to regret all of my color choices, but it's too late for that now, so we just let it sit and cook. Since I had added the larger sections of purple speckles, a lot of them did not fully set, which is totally normal for this kind of technique, but it's a good reason to not just put your yarn in a bucket immediately while it's soaking, because especially if the rest of the skein is lighter, it'll be sitting in a warm bucket of dye and can easily discolor the rest of your skeins if you let it sit there. This one definitely took a couple rinses before I was comfortable letting it sit and soak in this water. Now we just have to hang it up and wait for it to dry before we can see it in the light. Once these were all completely dry and in the sunlight, I was so much happier with how the speckles came out and how the colors went together in general. They remind me of a really pretty muted bouquet of mums, and they're just perfect for fall, which it is almost spring, so good choice, Gina. I really like dyeing this yarn, and I think that the quality of yarn before and after was unchanged. The dyeing process didn't make the yarn any different or feel worse or damaged that I could see. I have actually dyed this yarn up before and made gloves with the outcome, and I can approve that it is just wonderful to work with still. Because it gets washed and expands slightly, I can say that these skeins are slightly more plump than the pre-dyed wool of the Andes worsted yarn that you can buy from their site. So if you have a project you love using those for, these skeins may cause a slightly different gauge, but will still work very nicely. I was really happy with how evenly covered we got that tonal purple to be, and these speckles, man, are just, I love speckles. I could easily overdo it. I could add more all the time, but I think the purple added a really nice depth with like the lighter shades of orange and yellow, and I just really like the way this yarn holds speckles. Thank you all so much for dyeing with me today. Let me know what you think of the final outcome. Are you a fan of KnitPicks or excited to go try the line out for the first time? What animal fiber yarns of theirs are you hoping we'll test out next time? Leave some dye color suggestions in the comments below for the next one. See you then!